Hello, Aubrey here, and today we're heading into day 4 of our Bequest mode playthrough. As a quick recap, last episode we were investigating the mysterious pair of pictures showing up in many of the manor rooms. We know from a note in the commissary on day 1 and a vision from Alzara on day 3 that the picture pairings differ from each other by a single letter. I scoured my previous day's footage and placing those letters into a grid corresponding to their location in the house produces the following. And so, my goals for day 4 are to fill in as many missing letters possible, explore new rooms to discover any secrets hiding within, and look into the disappearance of my in-game mother, Mary, also known as Marion Marigold. I want to experience this playthrough from the lens of the protagonist, Simon, and I think he would be most interested in learning about his mother's fate, particularly after the juicy red letter we found in the shelter, penned by our mother's cousin Courtney, that talked of duels and political intrigue and, well, let's get on with it as we explore day 4 in Blueprints. Yesterday in the dark room, we found a picture of a tree next to a certain locked gate, showing that before it was chopped down, the tree had a date carved into it. So, right at the gate, we are going to see if that date fits. The code found in the darkroom photo was, in fact, a match for the locked gate off the campsite grounds, and opening said gate gave us a new location and our second permanent addition, the apple orchard. Having the orchard unlocked means that each day we will start with an extra 20 steps in addition to our initial 50. Yummy apples. I looked around the orchard until a pipe with a dial caught my eye. So you know I had to turn it, causing a blue flame to appear in one of the fire bowls on the overlook near the front of the manor. I'll have to keep my eye out for a few more of those flame lighting contraptions, as there are 4 total bowls on this precipice. Exploring more in the orchard, I came across another strange contraption I couldn't interact with, along with a sundial that I couldn't interact with. And yet, in the shed, there was a book I could pick up. The Gardener's Logbook, started in 1992 by the groundskeeper Robert Nagula. In his log, he complained a bit about the previous groundskeeper before continuing on to the more interesting topic of room drafting locations and soil quality. It seems that many of the green rooms can only be drawn on the edges of the manor. I took note of the best spots to draft his beloved green rooms and screenshot the rest of the pages for future review. On the floor of the shed was a strange golden object that reminded me of the stands holding gems in the safes we discovered so far. But look as I might, I could not find a corresponding gem or letter there in the shed. Dropping to 42 steps, I headed down the west path, across the bridge, and to the outside door, where I picked up the Toolshed. This outer room grants the player 2 special items that could prove useful in my house exploration. My 2 items were the metal detector, giving me a greater chance of finding keys and coins, and a lockpick kit that would allow me a chance to unlock doors without the use of a key. I made my way back to the entrance hall with a measly 38 steps to my name and began drafting rooms to fill out the manor. On the western wing, I found a closet with an ivory dice, giving me the ability to re-roll floor plans once per dice as needed. And later, I located the parlor where the magnifying glass sat waiting. This item had proven very useful in the previous episode, so I was delighted to see it again so early in the day. The parlor puzzle was slightly harder to riddle out, but I managed to acquire the prize gems within. And today's billiard game provided a keycard for all my electronic security door needs. Heading into the nursery granted me another 2 dice, and a look at one of the missing letters for my house grid. Right after I find whatever is triggering my metal detector, that is. After picking up the coins on the floor, I checked the pictures and saw a tiger and a tear, giving us a G and showing the word on rank 5 as 8. To the east of the passageway, I pulled the commissary, but was too low on funds to afford most of the goodies therein. Yet. That sledgehammer in particular would be handy to use on the chest waiting for me in the courtyard. Off the courtyard, I wanted the ability to head north, but was short the gem needed for security, so I used my very first dice reroll, allowing me to pick up the dining room. This room goes north, will have steps for me if I reach high enough rank in the manor, and as an added bonus, completes our rank 3 word with a K. So far, we're up to 8 dates crack 8 saves. North of the dining room, I was tempted to draft the greenhouse, but decided on the dark room to have a chance at continuing north on the eastern hall. Lights out. Like I could literally see nothing. But at least my lockpick kit worked, and I decided to risk drawing the room with the gem requirement. This random draw gave us the pool, a room filled up almost completely by, you guessed it, a pool. But it does add a locker room, sauna, and pump room to the room draws, the last of which popped up immediately upon drafting from the western door. The boudoir would allow us a path north, but I was really curious about the pump room, so I drafted it even though it would dead-end us this particular path. Before heading into the pump room, I drafted the northern pool door, utilizing another dice reroll to continue north when the initial draw did not cut it. I selected the east wing hall, tried for a dip in the pool, then headed into the pump room to find a chest and a series of tanks, pipes, and controls I would need to riddle out in order to do something. On the wall, I found a pump room schematic that shone some light on the lever tank layout, and using this, I was able to fill up the kitchen with fountain water, and the greenhouse with water I drained from the pool. I really hoped there weren't too many chemicals in that pool water. Next, I was able to fully drain the pool and headed next door to see the results. There was quite a bit of coinage pooling up down there. Before leaving the area, I went back to the pump room and completely drained the fountain, hoping I would make it back to the front drive at some point today to see the results, if any. Flushed with funds, I made my way back to the commissary, where I purchased a bunch of gems, the sledgehammer to shatter trunk locks, and running shoes to help with step retention throughout the manor. I was already halfway there, so at this point I headed back to the west and drew the drawing room in order to continue north from there. I debated drafting the sauna off the drawing room to help out with tomorrow's step count, but instead elected to use my free redraw drawing room perk to pull another room I'd yet to see, the drafting studio, whose card text reads, "Select a new floor plan to permanently add to your estate's draft pool." Immediately as you walk into the drafting studio, there is a calendar that confirms November 7th as the initial day of our journey. And a little diorama in the room contains a tiny safe on which you can enter a code if you have the magnifying glass handy. Since I didn't know the code, I started searching the room for any hints I might find. On the table was a book called Drafting Strategy Volume 1 that covers the room colors and particulars of the corresponding color groups. According to the publication, blueprints are the standard room color type, but you also have violet for the manor's bedrooms. These rooms are associated most with gaining steps, are likely to have items, but generally only have 1 to 2 doors, making them cumbersome when trying to navigate freely through the manor. Next up are green rooms that can provide gems, often contain items, and will usually have 2 to 3 doors, making them a better choice if you're hard up for gems or open routes. Orange rooms are hallways and have an association with keys, will rarely contain items, and on average have the most number of doors that you can find for rooms in the manor. Gold borders mean the room is classified as a shop. You'll often need coins to interact with the room services, and will usually offer you 1 exit aside from the door you came in on. Red rooms are associated with vexation, which I find a particularly fun resource when playing a puzzle game. These red rooms will seldom have items, but the doors they offer rival that of the halls. Last but not least, they touch on prismatic rooms, the most notable of which being the aquarium that registers as a room of every color, and so can be used to proc the color benefits noted on any of the other rooms. Also on the table is the Great Hall partitioning plan for what looks like today. Neat. So you can see in the little diorama a layout of dead ends and exits in the Great Hall for that day if you manage to pull the drafting studio along with said Great Hall. The calendar on the wall is the most hint-like item I saw, so I tried the combination 1107 since this was the date marked, but the safe did not open. I also tried entering in today's date from the partitioning plan, but again, the safe remained shut. I'd have to puzzle that out a bit more, but first I checked the floor plans on the drafting table to choose which I wanted to have permanently added to my manor pool. My options for today were the Dovecote Tower, added to the estate by Simon's great uncle at the request of Mary, Simon's mother. This room allows floor plans drawn with it to be rotated. Then we have the Clock Tower, a heavily restricted room that costs a gem but lets you begin the next day with bonus keys. And finally, the Dormitory, a scholarly bedroom that provides extra steps when certain criteria are met. As Simon, I went with the Dovecote, with the hopes that this room would help me discover more about my mom. Plus, room rotation sounded like a nice benefit. I tried a few more random codes on the mini safe, but decided to move on for now, hoping to come back later if my steps allowed. North of the drafting studio, I pulled another new floor plan, the locker room, where I found a bench key and security locked door. There were also a bunch of locked lockers that I might have to come back and check if I find additional keys. You know, like the ones the locker room supposedly spread throughout the house upon drafting? West of the boiler room, I drew security, and as it was the first time this room had been drafted, I was treated to an atmospheric cutscene that embodied the eerie feelings of being alone in a large and shifting estate. Alone, or perhaps being watched? On the desk sat a notepad that let me know blue memos were true and red memos were lies, with the magnifying glass letting me see the bonus information that red memos might not be lies if written by hand. In security was also a computer terminal that let me see there were 4 keys and 2 trunks currently in the manor, and had a way to change the likelihood of security doors and whether they would be unlocked if powered down. I set security doors to high as I had the keycard to provide entry, and I set offline mode to unlocked because that's what the system text told me was best to do when someone was in the estate. I used the password found the previous day to log into the system, placing a special order for a shovel to be added to the commissary in a couple days' time. On the bulletin board, I found a red memo stating that the antechamber would be unlocked, and I knew this was a lie thanks to the helpful note over on the desk. There was also a blue memo indicated the higher ranks would contain more locked doors, and I knew this to be true from experience and because of the color of the paper. South of security, I grabbed the boudoir, where I collected my safe gem and checked out the pictures on the wall. Spine and pine meant an S, started the word on rank 7. North of security, I pulled the utility closet, where the wall picture pair indicated an I at the start of rank 8. At the northern boiler room door, I was offered a door connecting to the antechamber, so I took it to see what the antechamber was all about. What it's about is a closed door with no handle or keyhole. Lovely. But at least the telescope allowed for a pair of trunks to be added to the entrance hall. And the pictures showed that the rank 8 word either was or started with IF. At this point, I doubled back to the eastern wing, where I busted open the chest in the courtyard, ate the quail waiting in the dining room for having reached rank 8, and checked out the contents of the dark room as the lights were now on thanks to my utility closet pull. I found a few keys on my trek back through the manor and completely forgot about the trunk waiting for me in the pump room as I passed by. The pictures in the east wing hall showed an S, and at the western door I was curious about the showroom, but didn't want to use all of my gems, so with my remaining dice I re-rolled, ultimately picking up the mailroom. Drafting the mailroom meant an order was placed for a package to be delivered to the mailroom the next time it was drafted. I saw that the room letter for this location was E, and I found a written letter addressed to Simon from his father. I checked out the Fen Airy stamp close up, which boasted a large red flag and the text, "In fog we are lost, in fire we are found." Very poetic. There was a trunk in the room, offering me a compass to draw north leading rooms more often, and a treasure map leading back to the billiard room. Interesting. On the mail desk sat a note related to Denny Rouvain and his employment status, with the super secret tiny text reading, "Did they ever prove he was the one that stole the Baron's mail? Ooh, the plot thickens." I also found instructions for the indicator settings in the utility closet, with a note saying more instructions were sent by email. An email sent to the office by chance? The first thing in the office that caught my eye was a finger pointing towards the panel along the wall, or maybe to the bust next to it. Instructions unclear. Sitting on the desk was a floor plan upgrade disc, and I found a note in the drawer with a line that stood out, not only because of its color, but because the note itself implies that the other book titles can be assumed to be red herrings. So March of the Count. Turning a dial in the drawer caused the aforementioned bust to rise up, but I was distracted by more notes on the desk and a chance to see what was on the upgrade disc currently in my possession. Out of the 3 Nook upgrades offered, I went with the Reading Nook, as having access to books should provide more lore and background on what happened to Marion Marigold. Then it was time to see what I could find on the office computer. Logging in, I was granted access to the electronic mail system. The first email was from Babbage requesting holiday instructions, which was a bit sad to read, but did not seem to impact my day's house tour. The second email, however, was from DC Power about the aforementioned fuse box instructions. I would have to try out the indicator order listed the next time I make it to the utility closet. I took screenshots of all the mail in the inbox, with the last providing even more information on how to make each indicator display the correct color in the sequence. Heading over to the safe, I knew I was looking for a date code due to the clue 8 dates crack 8 safes, and assumed the combination had to do with the book list from the desk drawer, or more specifically, March of the Count. So I kicked off my guess with the combination 0303, and it worked. I have since learned that if you count the Count's busts in the room, you'd get 3, and thus March 3rd is the answer. But either way, we gained access to a red gem and another red letter, this one with the number 8 penned sideways on its envelope. At least whoever this X is seems to feel guilty for their actions. Moving on from the office, I was offered a trio of new rooms to pick from. The secret passage caught my eye, a very clue-like manner of them, but I had so many items in my inventory that I couldn't help but pick the workshop to see what new contraptions I could create. In the workshop sat the broken lever, confirmation that L is the letter in this location, and a music sheet numbered 8 with the word message in bold. Looks like we've stumbled onto another puzzle. But first, I checked out the workshop crafting table, only to discover I was missing an item needed to combine the lever and sledgehammer. The only other items in my inventory that seemed to combine were the magnifying glass and metal detector, which would combine into an item called the burning glass, or the metal detector and lockpick kit, which would create the pick sound amplifier. I decided not to craft any new items just yet and continued exploring the workshop, discovering a schematic for the parlor game box with a handy hint. Through the workshop's powered door, the new room I didn't need gems for was the bunk room we'd seen in the last draw. It was a dead end, but would count as 2 bedrooms, granting us bonus steps due to the synergy with the previously drafted nursery. I found a few gems upon entry, an assortment of toys and electronics, and sitting on the bunk desk was what appeared to be the journal of a young Herbert. My in-game namesake had gotten to said journal and showed us what happens when siblings bicker. Cute. I thought the final note from a then older Simon to his brother upon returning the journal was charming and showed that even when grown up, the brothers would still throw a jab or two. And I couldn't leave the bunk room without mentioning the adorable little hamster in his enclosure, complete with his own private bunk bed. Absolutely adorable. And the final letter of rank 7 is A. It looks like those are all the new letters we'll have access to today, so here's what we have so far. Heading back through the workshop, I decided to craft the burning glass with our metal detector over the sound amplifier. This crude contraption can be used to light candles and ignite fuses, or so it says. Back to the office, I connected to the online security terminal and saw that I had quite the haul hanging out for me somewhere in the manor. So I made sure to collect coins I'd been able to spread previously from the office as I made my way back through the manor. And yes, I forgot about the trunk in the pump room yet again upon passing. Try as I might, I wasn't able to light the candles sitting there conspicuously back in the dining room. So I headed back to the entrance hall, where the 2 trunks provided by the observatory sat waiting. Inside was a few dice, money, and more money, lots more money. I realized I'd yet to draft from the eastern entrance hall door, so I pulled the kitchen, hoping to be able to purchase enough steps to trek back throughout the manor in search of candles or fuses to set fire. I bought everything I could afford, bringing my step count up to a respectable 49. then tested out if filling the kitchen up in the pump room had any effect on the faucet. Yes, we have water. Not sure why, but we have it. Better turn that off. I don't want to go draining the tank. At this point, I headed outside to check out the drained fountain, where I found the coin I tossed in on a previous day. At the bottom of the fountain sat a locked basement door. I would need to find the key before I could check out whatever secrets lurked inside the basement. I remembered there was a dark tunnel I'd found under the entry drive on day 1, so while I was outside, I headed back there, and to my delight, was able to light the torches on the wall for a small bit of illumination. In this tunnel, I found a foreman's log from some 75 years ago, along with a secret floor plan, the tunnel. I added it to my drafting pool, but was unable to explore further in this tunnel due to a series of crates blocking my way. So I headed back through the manor for more candles to light. Unlike the dining room, 2 of the candles in the chapel were able to be set ablaze, lifting up a hidden alcove in which sat the cutest little piggy bank, aptly named the Keeper of Tithes. Apparently, this little guy is the one who's been catching all my offerings in the chapel. There was an option to break him, but today was not a good day for coinage, as I had nothing to purchase, and thought filling him up further could prove beneficial on a later day's run. I headed back to the drawing room, and although there were many candle holders, not one contained a candle for me to try and torch. So I headed to the locker room, where I used my meager keys to open a few lockers. Yeah, steps are nice. Steps are very, very nice. The final locker I attempted had a few coins inside, and I knew just where they could go. I headed back north to the boiler room, as I had yet to power the thing up and just wanted to see how I could do it. After messing around with levers and switches, I finally had power. Life! Give my creation life! After activating the power source, I routed it north to the observatory in the hopes that this might power the antechamber door to open. But I regret to say I couldn't remember how to open the power door, so I didn't even enter the observatory to check. And instead, headed into the utility closet to try out the vac indicator code we discovered between the office and mailroom today. It took me some trial and error, but I finally managed to turn them all purple, then searched in my notes for the next step in the process. Setting the indicator lights to the correct sequence caused the panel behind the utility box to raise, exposing a secret space with a large lever just begging to be flipped. I had opened the Gemstone Cavern with that switch, meaning I would start each day with 2 gems from here on out. What a Gemstone Cavern that is. With my magnifying glass turned into a lighter, I was no longer able to find out the mini safe code in the drafting studio. So I tried to make up for this blunder through offerings at the chapel. Lots and lots of offerings. Once my coins were all spent, I traveled back to the entrance of the estate and outside to see if anything interesting was waiting for me in the newly opened cavern. Of note was a note talking about mine equipment and reservoir tunnels that I was not sure what to do with. So, like other pieces of text, I made a screenshot for future review. Also in the cavern was another of the pipe and dial contraptions I'd been searching for. So make that blue hilltop flame number 2. This had been a long and eventful day, and with the stars already in view over Mount Holly, I called an end to it there at the campsite, looking up at the misty sky in anticipation of what tomorrow's journey would bring. For day 4, we were hosting a grand bed and breakfast in which we reached rank 9, but were unable to gain entry into the antechamber, had made great progress on the picture pairing puzzle, and discovered 10 new rooms in the process. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.